where's Bridget? Didn't Bridget bring you? Oh, there she is. Hi. Okay, let's figure out longer and shorter. This one is shorter. This is shorter.
Cecil? I got the name of the book for you. Huh? Romania by Friendly Planet.
Oh, okay, let's try it.
I didn't forget,
Oh, thank you so much.
but I like to be mellow. Yeah. I won't. It's like my daughter last night, we were talking on the phone, she lives in Atlanta, and our granddaughter has made her decision, you know. She's going to go to a very good school, Georgia Tech. But I think that she would have been better off being out of mommy's clutches. Mommy's a control woman.
Okay.
And,
You mean Rosalie?
huh? What?
You mean Rosalie?
No, Rosie's not control.
No, okay, you're not
Believe me,
another wife?
I don't
Okay.
marry women like that.
No, I'm not sure who you're talking about.
My daughter.
No, your daughter, but your daughter's mother.
So my daughter has encouraged my granddaughter to go to Georgia
Oh,
Tech,
I see what you're saying.
which is in town.
Todo está bien, señor.
And I think she would.
Perfecto.
To be away
¿Y
from.
tú? ¿Cómo estás?
No me puedo quejar.
Yeah,
Excelente.
I've got
Yo tengo una buena vida.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Straightened out now.
I didn't do a good job.
Tengo una buena vida.
And I didn't say anything last night.
Well, good for you. Sometimes it's better not.
It's much better.
Yeah.
It's much
You don't
better.
get into trouble.
Huh? You keep your friends and your family.
Vende consumismo.
Hi,
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. We
Me
missed
gustó
you
enseñar esta
No,
clase.
I was here last week.
Me gustó enseñar esta clase.
a couple weeks.
No.
Entonces, miércoles en la mañana estoy aquí. Y miércoles en la noche estoy en mi clase de español en la noche.
I even got
Que
up.
comienza a las 6.
I worry about people when I don't see you.
No,
No,
I
en
hear
mi
what you
casa,
say. The week I was
en
gonna,
la computadora.
maybe last minute phone call was just too late to come in.
¿Cuántos alumnos tiene?
I understand.
En la clase hay solo 3.
Tres, ¿ok?
I
Sí,
saw
está
coming
bien.
people will say good
Y
riddance.
que es muy bueno para mí es que yo encontré en
You think
YouTube
I'm joking? I'm not.
una clase de vídeos que se llaman
I can
Easy
imagine some
Spanish
users that they would
y
want to
son
too.
10 minutos aproximadamente y tienen el inglés abajo.
Important thing is
Entonces, cuando yo escucho si ellos hablan muy rápidamente o si yo no conozco una palabra, yo puedo pausar el vídeo y después yo puedo leer adentro que es que
I made a major
dijeran,
mistake when I was in.
que decir en el
well, if
imperfecto,
you only made one, then you're
que
okay.
hiciera.
I ended up with 3 different.
Yo puedo ver abajo que hiciera.
Yeah, I started with Latin because my parents.
Lo que dice abajo.
Everybody in
Sí.
the got to
Ok,
speak Latin.
yo
I
leo
think that was a big
lo que
mistake.
dice abajo.
Well, after
Sí.
reading Latin, I decided I needed something more
Okay.
practical.
Pero
No.
en el imperfecto,
That wasn't a
Dijeron.
mistake.
No, wait.
quiero.
And then
Dijeron.
it's because of
Ay, wow.
Ok.
I ended
Yo,
up with Italian. I can't speak any English.
yo estoy de voluntario a ayudarlo con el español, ¿ok?
Perfecto.
Así que no hay problema ninguno.
Perfecto.
I took Spanish.
Muy bien.
In my generation, Latin was awful. Not today. My
Yeah,
generation.
oh, it was a mistake.
Los verbos están
I didn't
difíciles.
take Latin.
Los verbos
Son muy
están
difíciles.
In my mind,
A mí
too
nunca me
demanding,
gustó
you know.
la
And
gramática
I didn't think it was exciting. You know,
es muy seca.
some really smart kids
Son
took it.
reglas y,
I'm telling you.
Yeah, I know. Well, I took it
ok,
because I was
cuando yo,
también yo puedo decir que están diciendo.
Están diciendo.
Que estaban
I took
diciendo.
Spanish.
estaban diciendo y
Ah,
están
ok,
diciendo.
perfecto,
And
es
I
mejor.
took it
Sí, no,
En este caso.
están diciendo now.
Right.
Estaban
really
Estaban diciendo what they were saying. Yes.
exacto.
I speak
Claro
5
que
minutes.
sí, señor.
Cualquier,
If I spent the 5
cualquier
minutes
tiempo, cualquiera vez. Son muy, tengo un placer de ayudar.
cleaning
I
food
can't
comes in
believe
our
I
house.
understood a
We
lot
have
of
a
what you were
garden.
saying from my high school Spanish.
Oh, wow.
I teach them in
Wow, he's
Spanish.
right.
Okay.
I'm impressed with you.
One,
Me gusta mucho practicar.
they think this gringo actually knows something, and And secondly, I do it so I can keep up, because it doesn't matter what it is. Don't use it, your body or anything else, you lose it. Huh?
Four. This is the fourth one?
They're all a
Spanish?
bit jumbled together.
Fantastic.
Actually, Latin, I purposely for
At the moment, since I'm currently studying Spanish, that's the one I speak best. It used to be French.
Linguistics.
I used to speak French
I can
the
do the
best,
same thing with Spanish.
and I could get back into it very quickly.
Which one, besides English, which one do you think you speak the best?
Spanish.
Spanish? Yeah, you did very well.
Because I'm
For high
studying.
school Spanish.
It's like,
For high school. I got that you were studying it on YouTube.
Yes, exactly. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. So, did everyone have a wonderful Purim? What did everyone do? Did you come here to the synagogue for a Purim spiel, or?
It's mainly for young families.
It's mainly for young families, but they have a Purim spiel here?
Yeah.
Very nice, very nice.
No, I had a big theater, and we had a drum guy who came with the drums and let everybody.
Very nice, very nice.
We had a Megillah reading.
A Megillah reading, very nice.
Without a lot of slachmana.
Very good. So where did you have your Megillah reading? For the adults?
In the sanctuary.
Oh, but what when you say it's mostly for the young families?
Yeah, I'm talking about the Purim Carnival and
The
everything,
Purim Carnival. Got it.
which was Sunday. And I didn't go.
So you came Saturday night for the Purim. Okay. We did our Purim celebration Sunday afternoon. We had our spiel Sunday afternoon, because it just for my congregation it makes sense. Many more people will show up on a Sunday afternoon than on a Saturday night.
Absolutely.
Many more. And then we had a dinner afterwards. And what we do in my synagogue is I always play Haman, and I go around and I run up to people and I stick my tongue out and I scream at them, and they're like, "Rah!" And we do it to Motown. So for instance, when Vashti is dismissed by Ahasuerus, and she walks out to "I will survive," and then they have the beauty pageant where all the women come up before the king, and that's to "You better shop around, you better." So it's very funny, and then I come out in the third chapter with "Signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours," and everybody screams at me and they throw things at me, and it's wonderful. So we really have kind of a raucous time in the spirit of Purim. And then at various times throughout the story, I'll stop and switch to rabbi mode for a moment and teach about that verse. Why was that verse just important? Why was that verse important? That kind of thing. Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm glad everyone had a good time. It's important for us. And to bring things to our moment right now in 2024, Haman is called the Agagite because he was a descendant of King Agag, who was an Amalekite king. And so it brings to us the image of the Amalekites when God says, "Utterly destroy the Amalekites," and we can think of Hamas right this moment as the modern-day Amalekites. And so that is why my personal opinion is I support 100% the mission of Israel to wipe out Hamas, 100%. I have some issues with how they're doing it, but I support the mission statement completely because they are the Amalekites of our time. Yes. Oh,
You were at war. I'm sorry.
say again?
I says, my point is, not when you are at war. There is always collateral damage when you are at war.
So
You cannot help it.
Zisel says there's always collateral damage when you are at war, and that's correct.
The only way not to have collateral damage is The only way not to have collateral damage is to have peace. But it takes two to tango. It takes two to make peace. You cannot unilaterally make peace when somebody's out to kill you.
Yep, this is true. Okay, last comment, and then we move on to finish Romania.
Okay. Israel is probably bends over backwards to keep the collateral damage to a minimum, and the ratio of innocent lives to those that deserve to get killed is the smallest ever.
What's that?
This ratio, we have the smallest percentage of collateral damage compared to the people who were really attacking. If you go back to World War II, 55 million people died in World War II.
Okay, let's finish up Romania. Hopefully we'll have time to start Russia, but if not, then we'll wait and start Russia next week. So let me just review for 1 minute just the last things we talked about last week to kind of get us back into what we're discussing. So in 1900, there were 250,000 Romanian Jews, and that's 3.3% of the population at the beginning of the century. When World War I comes about, there were 882 Jewish soldiers who fought who died. In 1919, we have the Paris Peace Conference, which gave citizenship to Jews. It gave minority rights to Jews, and so it gave them emancipation, their civil rights. How does World War I end? With the Axis powers losing, correct, and reparations, which Treaty of Versailles, very good. These were all right. It ends with the Treaty of Versailles. I just bring this in because these are things we should know as educated adults. The Treaty of Versailles is what ends World War I. Everybody, all the powers meet in Versailles, France, and it is decided then the terms of surrender for Germany and then what they have to do after the war to make up for what they did during the war, and also the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire as well. Absolutely correct. And so part of the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles is that Germany was responsible for reparations for all the damage they caused. And we can say, okay, well, okay, we understand that. They understand that. But what it caused was hyperinflation in Germany, meaning that a loaf of bread costs 300,000 marks. You know, the value of the money was nothing.
They were bringing the money around in wheelbarrows.
They were bringing the money around in wheelbarrows, exactly. So the money was worthless, basically. And so the population, the German population, was both demoralized because of having to had surrender, and they were in a very dire economic position. And they were humiliated, exactly correct. And so it is no surprise to us that when a figure comes along in Hitler who says, I'm going to restore the dignity of Germans, I'm going to make this country great again, for lack of a better way of saying it. And the people were very sensitive to that message, and they wanted to feel good about themselves again. So they listened to him. And of course, the end is horrific, and we know that. All right. So in 1919, we have the Paris Peace Conference, and Romania gives Jews citizenship, and it emancipates them, giving them civil rights.
during the interwar period, and when we say the interwar period, that's between World War I and World War II. The interwar period, there were thousands of Jews who moved from the USSR to Romania. Why did they move? They were fleeing persecution and pogroms, which we're going to talk about coming up. They were conscripted into the army. Absolutely. Yep, that's correct too.
We know someone who fell into that category.
So when we get there in a little bit, I'll ask you to speak on that. Under Nicholas I, not the Nicholas and Alexandra who were deposed later, Nicholas II's ancestor, Nicholas I. He conscripts the male Jewish children into the army. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. There were Reformed Jews at the time, as we talked about last week, in Transylvania. There was which was located in central Romania. Everywhere else, it was what we would call today Orthodox Judaism. They didn't call it that back then. It was just Judaism. It was traditional Judaism. Orthodoxy, the label comes about a little bit later in time, but we can say traditional Judaism. In Bessarabia, we talked about that last week, which is modern-day Moldova, there was a very large population of Jewish social Zionists. And remember last week we talked just for a couple of minutes about the various kinds of Zionism. We all understand Zionism as the desire of the Jewish people to have a homeland. But that vision was realized in several different ways. So we had political Zionism from Theodor Herzl, and he just basically said, we want a homeland. We want a state/country for Jews. And we want borders, political borders and boundaries that give us this land. That's what we want. Rav Kook basically said, we want a land for us, we want a homeland for it, but it has to be a Jewish land. It has to be in our religion. So he was the founder of religious Zionism. And then we had social labor Zionism. And these were mostly from Eastern Europe and Russia, and they came over to work the land and form the kibbutzim. And it was a collective, yes.
Wasn't Ben-Gurion
Ben-Gurion, yes, was a labor Zionist. And so once again, that whole idea of socialism, we talked about it last week a little bit, appealed to Jews in a big way. Why?
When an oppressed people sees the light of freedom and equality, they will run to it. And the Jews in Eastern Europe were oppressed. And socialism gave them a light into the darkness. That's why.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So what does socialism do? We talked about it a little bit last week. It levels the playing field. Everyone has the same. Now, specifically, that would even go more towards communism. But the idea that we don't have a super wealthy class and we don't have a super poor class, we have everyone kind of here. Now, obviously, through corruption and through nepotism and through all kinds of things, it sounds good in theory, but it works out that the rich always get richer, and et cetera. But for the Jews, it was very attractive, right? They were where on the economic hierarchy? They were way at the bottom, way at the bottom. So something comes along and says, oh, you get to move up. and be level with everybody else. Yeah, we'll take that. We'll take that. We like that. Yes. And so socialism was very attractive. And we also talked about some of the differences between socialism and communism, and the fact that we have entities in the United States which are socialist entities, which we all love and we all think are great. The VA, the public school systems, the public garbage and trash collection, everything like this. Everybody pays taxes so that everybody gets a benefit. And, you know, sometimes there are arguments from the side of, well, I don't have any children going to school. Why should I pay taxes for schools? And because other people pay for you. Good. And, you know, there has to be some kind of idea of not being selfish in the world, right? We have to all kind of help each other. Yes. I also think that we all benefit when we live in an educated society. That's unquestionably true. Unquestionably true. Yes. So in Bessarabia, which is modern-day Moldova, there was a fairly large community of Jews who were devoted to social Zionism. They wanted a homeland in which everyone would go back and form collectives like the kibbutzim, and everyone would work for the benefit of everyone. It's a nice concept. So is Moldova part of Romania? No. Presently, no. Moldova is a separate country from Romania. If you recall from our map from last week, Moldavia was one of the northern principalities of then Romania, and then became an independent country called Moldova. It was part, originally, the area was part of Romania, and it was called Moldavia, a northern principality. And then it gained country status. It became independent. So in the 1920s, we have absolutely the rise of fascism. And we talked a little bit about that last week, and you hear this word all the time. So remind me once again, what did we talk about? What is fascism? Dictatorship, yes. Fascism always has an autocrat, a ruler who has all the power, a dictator of some kind. We're talking about Mussolini. We're talking about Hitler at the time. Franco at the time as well. Very good. And along with the rise of fascism in the 1920s came the rise of course, anti-Semitism. There was a Jewish quota on higher education. When did we have that in this country?
I have a cousin, she's gone already, but she was the first woman and the first Jewish woman that was accepted to Columbia University, and that was in the 40s.
Very good. So in our country, in America, there was a time when we were very anti-Semitic as a country. 1920s, but even a little bit later, the 40s and the 50s especially. What do you mean we were? What about we are? I think we're a little better now than not right this second, but for many years we were better than that time period, but there has always been. You're right. You're right. So my dad always wanted to be a medical doctor. He was born in 1930. He was always wanted to be a medical doctor. He went to school. He did well in school. And then when it came time to apply for med school, there were quotas for Jews, and no one would accept him because he didn't fall within the quota. So he ended up going to NYU and got his doctorate and became a businessman. But he never went to med school because they wouldn't allow him to. They couldn't. He couldn't. Your brother was born in 1946. And he couldn't get into certain colleges. And he couldn't get into Yale. He couldn't get into a number of universities, which is why everyone, I don't know if you know this, that is why Brandeis University was founded. Brandeis University was founded because there were so much anti-Semitism that Jews could not get into into colleges and into graduate schools. And so what did we Jews do? We founded our own university for our own people. And of course, we know Brandeis is incredibly well respected in the world today. And so that's why we did that. In the same way that in the late 1800s and early 1900s, Jews were not allowed to engage in business transactions. So why do you think Macy's, Gimbel's, all of the department stores cropped up? Because the Jews said, fine, you won't let us do it with you, we'll do it on our own. And so we opened our own department stores for our people. Of course.
I don't know if anyone here knows it, but about 40% of the student body at Brandeis is now non-Jewish.
40% non-Jewish now, but that's wonderful. But originally it was founded because Jews didn't have a place to go. So we said, the heck with that, we're going to open our own place. And look what we did. It was amazing. And also our own country clubs. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Good point. Okay, so during this rise of fascism in the 1920s, something crops up in Romania, and it's called the Iron Guard. And you can imagine what the Iron Guard was. The Iron Guard was a kind of like the Gestapo, kind of, and it was an arm of the government to suppress Jews, and the Iron Guard, of course, was went parallel with what was going on in Nazi Germany. And it established racial discrimination as the norm. And so remember, when Hitler is ascending to power, his message is very powerful. We can't let people who are less than ourselves be part of us. We can't admit into our population people of lesser essence, people of lesser being, people of lesser intelligence, people of lesser values. And the idea that the German race was at the top, the Aryan race was the descended from the Norse gods, and therefore the Jews, and especially the Jews and the Gypsies, the Romani, were Untermenschen, underneath human beings, subhuman beings, and so that is part of any fascist autocrat who comes to power. That autocrat demonizes people within that country who would what's the word? Who would degrade the magnificence of the country. And in Hitler's case, that would contaminate pure German blood. So it was racial discrimination. It was based on bloodlines. And Janice says she's hearing the same stuff in this country today. I won't get political, but
You're smart.
I refuse to talk. No, but people are free to express your opinions. I just won't endorse or condemn any side of the aisle. It never works. Okay, by 1940, yes.
Can we go back to the Paris conference? Because
Can we go back to the Paris conference because
the Romanian king was related to the French aristocracy, and although Romania was part of the German army and they participated, they were rewarded with extra territory. So that's when they took 2/3 of Hungary. They gave it to Romania, and Hungarians are living there. So it was purely marriage, whatever.
You know, that's very interesting. You just said that the Romanians added territory from Hungary, because half of my family, half my ancestry is Hungarian, but I know they lived in a little town in Romania that had been Hungary. So thank you for that. It was the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Correct. So by 1940, Romania adopts the equivalent of the Nuremberg laws. And what were the Nuremberg laws? We should know this. I don't need to know specifically what the laws were, but what was the basic idea of the Nuremberg laws? Yes, that's true.
The laws making Jews not being citizens, essentially having no rights whatsoever. Can't go to a movie, you can't go to a park, you can't even walk on the sidewalk, and God knows what else.
Good. And so, the main part for us of the Nuremberg laws is that it established Jewish identity as coming from a certain percentage of blood, meaning whether your grandparents, your great-grandparents were Jewish, then you were considered Jewish. So the Nuremberg laws established the racial identity of Jews and basically gave Hitler the green card to classify many people as Jews, even though they may not have been practicing Judaism for several generations. So they were it's a very important set of laws, the Nuremberg laws. We should remember that.
It required Jews to wear a star.
Yeah, and that it required Jews to wear a star. Yes. Ultimately, the king arrests the Iron Guard because he was thinking, you know what, we don't want to be like the Nazis. And this is what's happening. We are becoming like the Nazis. But not before 80 anti-Jewish regulations were passed. Jews were tortured. Jews were beaten. There were 120 Jews killed, as well as the Roma, the Gypsies. So under these laws, both in Germany, Romania, under fascism, the Gypsies were down there with us at the bottom. They were considered mongrels, and their origin was completely according to the dictators, completely impure, and they had to be eliminated along with Jews.
So, Rabbi, could you explain where the gypsies came from? Do we know? I mean, they're
So the question is, can you explain where the gypsies came from? And actually, I don't know the information on that, but I will find out for you. Maybe Zisel knows.
It is my understanding that originally the gypsies were Indo-Europeans, and they were nomads, and they traveled and mixed with a lot of people. But originally they were Indo-Europeans, and I think came from the area of India, but I'm not totally sure.
where did they come from?
Huh? For the area of India.
They came from India. Their language is some kind of Indian dialect, which they still have. There's a relatively big minority of Roma in the Czech Republic. That's why I know that that's a problem. Of course, racism. Czech racism is against Roma.
So they're from India?
You know, as you're talking about this, I seem to recall reading about that at some point, and I think you are absolutely correct. Yeah. Way back in history, yes. Yes. So during World War II, Romania sides with the Nazis, sides with the Axis powers, and that all changes. In 1941, we have Operation Barbarossa. Operation Barbarossa was the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, or the attempted invasion of the Soviet Union. And during that time, there were 250,000 Jews who were murdered, as well as 11,000 Roma who were murdered as well. And this happened in large part by the German troops who were called the Einsatzgruppen. Does anyone know? This is a name we should know too.
It's kind of like an elite group.
It is absolutely a German word. So who were the Einsatzgruppen?
There were special elite groups who were sent first in front of the regular army, and the only reason from there was to get together and kill the Jews.
Okay, very close, very close, very close. So the Einsatzgruppen were a special military force aside from the Nazi military. They took their orders from Heydrich, who is one of Hitler's very, very top elites, and they didn't go in before the Nazi army. They came in after the Nazi army. They were kind of like, in a very horrible way, to say they were like the cleanup crew, and they would go in following the army and execute Jews. Baba Yar, that was Einsatzgruppen. Same with many, many other places. We've seen, videos, just horrible, horrible videos of large trenches, and the Jews had to line up, and they were shot, and then they fell. That's Einsatzgruppen. They came in after the army and took out whoever was left.
when I was a very young girl, I met this, my aunt was a camp survivor, and she had some friends who survived with her. And this lady, we were somewhere, and it was night, and there was the full moon, and she told me and my sister the story that she it was night, and she was with a whole village ready to get shot, and she looked at the moon, moved her head, and that's why they didn't kill her. They were shooting them. She fell like with everybody at night. She got out of the grave and survived the war this way.
I heard a horrible story from a non-Jew, but I think he was a Pole. Anyhow, I think he was a Pole, a non-Jewish, and he was there during World War II, and he knew Yiddish, which he had not used in over 20 or 30 years, but he was interviewed, and he said that in his area, it could have been Babi Yar, I'm not terribly sure, but however, after the Jews were lined up in front of open graves and shot right into the graves and shot while they were in the graves, he said, and this is horrible, for a long time, for a long, long time, the earth was moving. That's the Jews who had not died. And that's horrible.
I just have a question. I just wonder how these people are selected. I mean, they're not given drugs. I mean, they're just evil people are probably selected for this elite group that would outright kill people like that.
Yes, I can't say definitively. I haven't read anything on the selection process to be part of the Einsatzgruppen, but I would imagine, the German army was, in a horrible way, very efficient, very serious, and very, they were brutal, and I'm sure they were handpicked. I'm sure they probably looked at all of the people the recruits that they had and found those who were the most sadistic. And they brought them out to be this elite, horrible killing squad. They were called mobile killing squads. Einsatzgruppen meant mobile killing squads. They went wherever the German army went afterwards and finished off whoever was left.
I'm just wondering, because evil never stops in history of the world, but the Hamas, the story is they were on drugs, and maybe they were part of this type of, evil people, that were killing them, on October 7th,
Well, absolutely, we know absolutely that the Nazi army was fed amphetamine drugs to keep them always, and that is why notoriously they didn't need a lot of sleep, and they were always ready to go because they were continually fed drugs to keep them awake and alert. Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
This is, I don't know, it's a very good story, but kind of strange. I had a cousin, he passed on already. He was from Belarus, same area, same town probably. Yeah, same town as my father. Anyhow, he was put in a ghetto. He escaped the ghetto. He fought with the partisans. Then the Russian army came in and he fought with the Russians. So he fought the Germans throughout World War II. He told me that in the beginning, when Germany was, king and occupying all the territories, the soldiers were all puffed up and really feeling great. But at the end of the war, when he was fighting the partisans and the Russians, when he was fighting with them, says those soldiers were dispirited. They were just like this, from puffed up at the beginning of the war to very, very low.
Yes. Okay, we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to benevolently and graciously ask you to hold questions because I want to finish up Romania today. Okay? I love your questions. They're wonderful, wonderful. I want all kinds of participation from you. That's what this class is for. But let me just go ahead and finish up Romania now. So in 1944, King Michael of Romania leads a coup against the former king. And when he is successful and he takes the throne, he switches allegiance from the Axis to the Allies. This creates a huge problem for him because the Soviet Union was part of the Allies, and they enter Romania, and it paves the way for communism to be brought into Romania. Ultimately, King Michael has to abdicate in 1947, and he's sent into exile. And he tries to return in 1989, when Romania overthrew communism. He tried to return, but there were all kinds of obstacles to his return. In 1997, they gave him citizenship to Romania, and then he died ultimately in 2017 at 98 years old. But between 1945 and 1985, Romania was communist, and there was a great deal of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. In other words, for those years, children were not taught about everything was downplayed, and they didn't want the population to know so much about it.
They were the only country of the communist country that had close ties with Israel.
They were the only country among the communist countries who had close ties with Israel. There was, of course, mass immigration to Israel following Israel's declaration as a state in 1948. And in 1987, there were 23,000 Jews in Romania, half of whom were over the age of 65. And the ones who had emigrated to Israel became the second largest ethnic community in Israel after the Moroccans. In 2004, Romania became part of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. So they were trying to make up for the past. But by 2011, there were only 3,271 Jews left in Romania. They are mostly Hasidic, Haredi, Chabad. There's at least one kosher restaurant in Bucharest. The Yiddish theater is still going in Bucharest. And what's interesting is that Romania was the origin of a number of Hasidic sects, including the Satmar sect. They all began in Romania. And then, let's see, in 2015, 2017, only 39% of Romanian families, non-Jewish families, would accept a Jewish family member. That tells you about the sentiment of the Romanians. They wouldn't accept their daughter or their son to marry a Jewish partner. In 2016, a Romanian was appointed as the chairman of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which had been established in 2004. And by 2021, becoming a Holocaust denier was against the law. And they had one person who was arrested and tried in 2021 and given a sentence for Holocaust denial. So I think in total we can say that Romania is probably not the most hospitable place for Jews, although you will find out for us coming up. And
The great synagogue in Sofia.
the great synagogue in Bucharest.
And it's operating and it's attended by parishioners.
Good. So Gary says there is the Great Synagogue in Bucharest, and it is operating, and people attend it. So after your trip, you'll give us a nice history of what you learned while you were there and what you saw. Okay, everyone. Next week we're going to start Russia. Yeah, we got a lot of stuff on Russia. That's going to be 2 classes for sure. Have a beautiful week, everyone.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you talk about Russia,
Yes.
will you include Belarus? Because there's a large Jewish community from Belarus.
Yes. So Ziesel's question is, will you include Belarus when you talk about Russia? So I pulled this up exactly for you because when the Pale of Settlement, I had you in my head when I'm writing this down. When we talk about the Pale of Settlement, it was composed of Belarus, parts of Belarus, Lithuania, Moldova, Ukraine, Poland, Latvia, and Russia. Because I remember that was a big deal for you. So I will find out as much information as I can on that. All right, everyone, have a beautiful week.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
And you know what? The Gypsies today, the Roma in Romania, they're still discriminated
Yeah,
against.
I'm sure they are.
I mean, they have limited employment opportunities and they're socially ostracized.
I'm going to miss for 2 weeks. 'cause I'm
Unacceptable.
I know, because you're going to do Belarus, which is where my family is from.
Well, I'm not going to do Belarus, but I'm going to
Okay,
talk a
you're
little
gonna
bit
talk
about it, yes.
Because I want to understand how the Jews came to Belarus. Like,
Okay.
from where? Like, and why there? I mean, I understand how we left. That I know, because that's recent. But how did we get there? And I even actually, there's a part that I don't understand. Well, we went to Palestine, but it's my great-grandfather in the 1880s. I mean, all this history that you're talking about, that's my family. But, and they were Zionists, obviously. He was a rabbi, religious Zionist. But then, did they travel over land? Did they go by
Let me
train?
see what
Did they- But I won't be
information I
here,
can find
and I
out.
won't be here.
But you know what? When I see you
Yeah.
the next time, I'll give you a
Okay.
short report on what I learned.
Thank you. Yeah, because I'll be gone for 2 weeks, and then it's Pesach. So after Pesach, I will see you.
No problem.
Thank you.
No, her ankle, because you can't walk
Good morning.
How are you?
I am well, thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
And secondly, I was going to ask about your show. I haven't really.
Yeah, we are working on a show.
It's going to be Sunday night, May 5th?
Yeah.
Okay, because that day I'm having snooze for my neighbors in the morning. But
It will be the evening.
Yeah.
I don't know offhand, but I'm thinking that it's that area.
that is, yeah. No, I know. I looked it up. And it isn't on the calendar. Yeah.
So weird. APAC put together an evening something that night. Strange that it's doing something like that.
That's very cool.
Hi, Janice. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Oh, I'll come by, but it's just been very, like, there's been so much going on. But, sure, I'll come by your house, don't worry. We'll pick it up. Okay. But you haven't decided to move, looking for something. Okay. Well, I sent a few things which were the only things that I think you are. But you try out the place. It's always good. Yes. Hey, we're gonna have to get started in a minute. I understand. If you, do you use the computer? Can you send me an email? Of course. Yeah, just send me an email and remind me, send me an email to Daria and remind me that we need to set a date. Yeah, because I sent you once before. I know. You can't be a teacher and not use a computer. True. That's true. Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. I am obviously not Rabbi Schuldenfrei. Did you make an announcement, Susie or Rosalie, about Rabbi Schuldenfrei? No.
Well, we sent an email.
Okay.
Susie did. I didn't hear it. No, she sent an email out. You didn't get it? No, I didn't see it.
So good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. Hello to those at home. Hello to those here in the room. When Rabbi Schuldenfrei said that he needed to go and officiate at a funeral this morning, he asked if I would want to come and teach, and I said, "Do I? Of course I want to." I love being around all of you, and it makes me very happy to be here today, but not obviously for the reason that Rabbi Schuldenfrei couldn't be here. So today I put together some text specifically for this class, and one of the things that I wanted to point out to you before we go into the text this morning or say the blessing for learning is that I put together a series of texts on the environment and ecology because we're heading into Pesach. We're in springtime. Earth Day will be happening in, I don't know when, but sometime in April. And I thought that it might be of interest as unfortunately, we're going to get rain this weekend again. But assuming that ever ends, we'll be moving into this time of springtime. And I think it makes all of us more aware of our surroundings outside and the growth of new plants or flowers, all the kinds of things we love about spring. So I am not a militant environmentalist, so you should know that. I just really put together all of the Jewish texts that I thought were significant with regard to just being aware of how wonderful Judaism is, even in thousands of years ago, in being aware of the world that we live in that God gives us. So on that note, we'll say the blessing for learning together, and then I will distribute this, which you have noticed I did not distribute yet, because why? I hate it when everybody reads every text before we start. That's my MO. So let's say the blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. May we always be immersed in the words of Torah, and may we feel refreshed by our learning. So now we'll get these out to everybody. And Rosalie and Susie, I really thank you very much for having me be here today. Thank you.
Our pleasure that you're doing it. My goodness.
I think we have 23 of them, so it should be fine. Ooh, be careful. Okay. For those of you who are at home, of course, if Susie would like to, she can forward the text to you after the class. But as usual, we'll be reading them aloud so that you'll be able to hear. So I'm going to read the first one from Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything under heaven out of that text. But this is the one-liner: one generation goes, another comes, but the earth remains the same forever. So I brought that to your attention because this was written in a time when that's how they felt. They felt that while people's lives are limited, the experience of the earth is something that's very stable. We live in a time, do we live in a time that agrees with that? No. I mean, we don't live in a time that agrees with that. Obviously, it surrounds us, and it surrounds us in numerous different ways. It surrounds us from science, and that is correct. It reminds us from people who just spout out things when they don't really know. It can be any of those things. But we, I think, as you just said, have internalized for ourselves that there ain't no absolute certainty that our earth will stay the way it is. Yes, Warren, what would you like to say? Wait, I haven't been here for a few weeks, but I know the rules.
Okay, I don't know if you went over this when you were making your explanation. You said at the time when they were living, they believed the earth remained the same. But the earth always had famines. Now, doesn't it mean the earth is also changing? So didn't that count as the earth remains the same because they always had famines?
That's a really good point, Warren. And so let's talk about why. Look, if they didn't get rainfall, there were a lot of times they didn't get rainfall. We've got a ton of prayers in Judaism, one of them that we're still saying, Mashiv haruach umorid hagashem. And that means, may the wind blow and the rain fall. And we say it, interestingly enough, in between Shmini Atzeret in the fall and what? Pesach. Pesach ends saying that prayer. Now I'm going to tell you, we'll get to that in a minute. So there were rainfall issues. There were famine issues because of the lack of rainfall. Did they think that that was a global problem? Who did they think had control over that? Yes, Hashem, God. That's why we have all of these prayers. You're absolutely right, Warren, because those things happening in our world now, we call something different. We look to something different. We look to human action about it. And in those days, they said, why is God not bringing rain? Why is God creating this famine? And they prayed. But it's an interesting comment, because in some ways, these things that we now look at one way have been some of them, not all of them, I'm not saying that. There's a lot of difference. But some of them have been happening for thousands of years. So, not all. So, it's a really good point. Obviously, from our perspective, the earth does not necessarily remain the same forever. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into some texts that talk about our responsibilities with regard to this. But I want to point out one thing about what we're saying every time we do an Amidah, Mashiv haruach umorid hagashem. Why do we say it from Shmini Atzeret in the fall to the end of Pesach in the spring?
The rabbis were discussing it, and they decided they are praying for Israel, the weather in Israel, which is the only time when it rains in Israel.
So initially, that's what we say it for. We say it for rain, seasonally rain in Israel. So let me point out one more thing. Jewish scholars were smart and realistic. You can't say a prayer for something that just isn't going to happen. So, if you're smart, you start saying the prayer in the fall, after all the Jewish holidays except for Simchat Torah are over, and you stop saying it in the spring when the chances of rain are pretty slim, particularly in Israel. So they were not stupid. They knew that when you pray to God, you better be praying for something realistic, not something that just isn't going to happen as a miracle out of the sky. Does that make sense to you? Like, have you thought about that before? Right. So I love it that we are realistic. Even in our hopes and prayers throughout history, we are realistic, and that's one example. Okay, who wants to read the one that comes from Bereshit, from Genesis in the Torah? Do you want to come on down? Sorry, I'm very enthusiastic and energetic today because I'm happy to be here. I hope it doesn't bother you too much.
God said, "See, I give you every seed."
Up to your... Up.
Oh, closer?
Yeah,
I don't
closer.
want to swallow it. Okay? Is that
There you
better?
go.
Okay. God said, "See, I give you every seed-bearing plant that is upon all the earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit. They shall be yours for food, and to all the animals on land, and to all the birds in the sky, and to everything that creeps on earth, in which there is the breath of life. I give all the green plants for food," and it was so.
Okay, so this obviously comes from actually Bereshit, after the creation of the world. And what is God saying in this particular text? Be a vegetarian. No, it also we get to the point where we can eat meat, but yes, I'm giving you every plant. We get that. That's there. You can eat, the animals can eat, everything can eat from seed-bearing trees. But there's something else that it says as well. There's something implied here. Go ahead.
Well, if a tree isn't seed-bearing, then they cannot eat what it has to offer.
Okay, if a tree isn't seed-bearing, they can't eat what it has to offer. We'll see how that takes shape in a different paragraph as well. But I want you to look beyond the literal here. Who is God talking to? Adam. And he's saying to Adam, I give you seed-bearing plants that are on the earth, and every tree that's yours for food, and to all the animals on the land, which you're going to have to feed, that kind of thing. So why is God now talking to Adam about the seed-bearing fruit? Lois, did you want to say something?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. Okay, Nadia, what?
They have to plant it. Somebody has to plant it. So Adam has to plant it and take care of the trees.
Okay.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be many trees.
Okay. So Adam, God has put trees in the Garden of Eden, and a lovely gardening gift. And then, but Adam needs to look after these trees, and by connection has to look after the animals that we'll see in a minute. So that adds an element that is not really singled out in this paragraph, but is definitely there. Who's responsible for the Garden of Eden? Adam, meaning person. People are responsible for the Garden of Eden. And so when you expand that, what do you have? People are responsible for the planet, Cecil says. That is absolutely an important aspect of we read after Simchat Torah, we read Bereshit, and it's very interesting. And God creates the world, and then God creates a man and woman, and it happens 2 times, and it's a strange story, and you'll read it again next year. But the reality is here that in that very first parsha of the Torah, we are being told that we are responsible for the world in which we are now going to live.
Rabbi, there's no restriction on the plants that we eat, though, or that we plant.
There are,
Later, though, but
yes. In this particular paragraph, there's no restriction about it. But of course, they're going to be told, I didn't put this one in.
Eve comes, then
Yeah, they're going to be told you can't eat the tree of knowledge, and Eve breaks the rules, and they all break the rules, but that's not here. The reason I didn't put it here is because I'm focusing on us. Yeah, all of us. And but Rosalie is quite right. We get limited a little bit later on.
When I read this, that we can eat of seed-bearing fruit, I immediately thought, does the tree of good and evil or knowledge have seeds?
Well, what did she pick from the tree? So it's not really an apple, folks. Yeah, thank you. We don't know what fruit it was, but it wasn't an apple. That came into other people's descriptions later on, and that's what we got. I think what you would see in most Humashim, most Jewish texts, is fruit instead of apple. But we all get the picture, right? So it's a seed-bearing tree, and you're not supposed to use it. So now let's go on. Yes, go ahead. Before we go on, Bridget, what? Bear fruit, not they grow new leaves, they have flowers, they have different kinds of things, but food. Cecil, you're the last one, then we're moving on.
Just a comment on the story. It seems like we humans were tempted by the serpent to eat from the tree of knowledge. However, the story doesn't say anything about what we didn't eat from the tree of life.
Okay. The serpent wanted us to eat from the tree of knowledge, but it doesn't say anything about the tree of life. So, but wait till next fall to read that, and we'll talk about it. Today we're going to talk about trees and plants. So Kohelet Rabbah, I wrote for you this time, yesterday when I was preparing this, what text they come out of. So that one comes out of the Midrash, and I'm going to read it right now on the next page. When the Holy One created the human being, he took him and led him around all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, "Behold my works, how beautiful they are. All that I have created is within your domain. Take care, therefore, that you do not destroy my world, for if you do, there will be no one else to set it right after you." So based on the texts in Breshit, and I'm sure some of you have read this particular text from the Midrash before, but it's very powerful. Midrash is a very, 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 most of the Midrashim are very early texts. Very early texts. And so what do you make? Do you have any comments about Jewish perspective on our world and our responsibilities from this amazing, amazing text?
I mean, they were excellent, and they were very bright people, and I can see the global warming. I mean, you could fit that in here, that we have to take care of our world in whatever way we can and not let it be destroyed by ourselves.
Anybody else? I'll get you two. I'll get you two, I promise, but you'll have to come close.
It also intimates that maybe God had more projects than just this one, and he set it going and went on to his next project, and we were stuck with whatever was left.
Well, we don't know. We're earthlings, so we have millions of galaxies. So I'm not going to comment on alien life or anything like that right now. I don't know, so I can't comment.
I was just going to say that this text could be something taken from every environmental group today. okay? Because the warning is that this is what we've got, and we better take care of it because you can't repair it if you're going to destroy it. So I think it's brilliant. It's so impressive.
Isn't it
Yes, it's so impressive.
It's very, very, very impressive. It's also impressive because God has just created Adam. And what it says is not only a hope for the care of our world, but it is a faith and a hope for human activity, for human intellect, for human care, which is something that also is very important for us to know about. So I think it's a beautiful text. Lois and then Cecil, because ladies first. I'm sexist that way.
It's making me think of the phrase that I can't really complete about with the word olam, you know, hearing that this phrase seems to be encompassing that idea. Yeah.
Thank you, Lois. That was perfect.
I like to point out a line and a half that all living beings from this world should really take notice of. All countries. Do not destroy my world, for if you do, there will be no one else to set it right after you. Isn't that quite a statement on the political state of our world today?
Yes, thank you. Yes, and we're going to, I think I put in a text for that as well. So, yes, absolutely. You know, it makes me think about, and I'll diverge for a second, you know, there's so many movies made of alien attacks on invasions on the world. And one of the things that always happens when you have one of those movies is if there's an alien attack, everybody on the earth gets together. And then, you know, then they fight the outside influence and stay alive. So don't destroy my world. But in this particular case, even though it's a general don't destroy my world, it's don't destroy my world because you are responsible for these things in the garden. And our whole earth is our garden. So now we get to Genesis again, Torah, verse 22. So who would read that? Thank you. It's a brief one.
So long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease.
Okay. So what's the key phrase in this?
Shall not cease.
Okay, that's one of them. So long as the earth endures. So basically what you have already said is reiterated here in Genesis by God, saying, he's not going to say get it together yet, because they haven't yet done anything wrong. That will come very soon, but they haven't yet done anything wrong. But God is saying, look, this is who you were born to be. You were born to be a human being that can take care of other living beings and that can take care properly of the world surrounding you and all the gifts I gave you. So this is a reiteration of the fact that we are born into a world that has possibilities of incredible beauty, enough to eat, all of those things. And we still have to live that out in so many different ways. And sometimes we don't. But now getting to Rosalie's issue of trees and war, would somebody like to read the thing from Devarim, from Deuteronomy, the last book of the Torah? Go ahead. Who raised, Cecil? Did you also want, well, never mind. Loud and clear.
Okay, number 19. When in your war against a city, you have to besiege it a long time in order to capture it. You must not destroy its trees, wielding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. Are trees of the field human to withdraw before you into the besieged city?
What? Are trees human? Are trees of the field human? In other words, they're not human. They can't move away from you or run or fight or anything like that when you go to take them down. However, even in a wartime situation, now they do make an exception if it's not a fruit-bearing tree under great duress. However, definitely a fruit-bearing tree, and mostly all trees are not supposed to be touched in a war situation. I do need to say something. Pardon? Tell that to the bombs. So I do want to tell you, though, that I just heard a lecture about the war in Gaza, that Israeli planes and Israeli on-the-ground soldiers were told the same thing. So there are ethical rules that come from the Torah that have to do with a terrible war situation, and war is terrible no matter what. However, I just learned about that recently.
When I was in Israel, our guide mentioned many times that Israelis are crazy about trees, and that's why trees are everywhere you look.
Okay, not now, but Judy, you have to get close enough.
So a couple of months ago, I was on the phone with my niece, who lives on a kibbutz up in the north, and she said, I smell smoke. And she went outside, and she said, I can't figure it out. It's not real close. They live 5 kilometers from the Lebanese border. And she found out later that there's trees along the border, and they were being burnt down because, so they set a fire, because they discovered that there was all kinds of armament that was being hidden among those trees by the Hezbollah in the north. So they had to burn that forest down. That's what she was smelling.
They probably weren't fruit trees. So how many people have ever given money to JNF? How many people have ever planted a tree in Israel? Right. Did you want to say something?
I think the importance of trees is that they turn carbon dioxide into oxygen, and so these were brilliant people that were almost scientists because of the importance of trees. So, and a lot of trees are being cut down in the world, and that's part of global warming too.
On my first trip to Israel, the guide says, if you look at all the forests in Israel, they're all man-made. They were all planted. There were no trees.
Because they had swamps and all of that. It was terrible when they got there. If you take a look at what Mark Twain wrote when he went on his visit to Israel, he wrote basically a whole number of pages about how barren and no plants for no matter how long you walked. And look at us now.
I heard a commentary by one of the talking heads, and he happens to be very friendly to Israel, but he pointed out that the IDF is fighting under the most restrictive rules ever. They are actually putting their own soldiers in harm's way in order to protect civilians and not harm the non-combatants. And at the very end of the speech, he says, historians will look at this war to point out the extreme measures that the IDF is taking not to harm the innocents.
Yeah, so back to trees. So it's fine because we just read a paragraph on what happens when you have a war in your city. And so we need to be aware of how things are happening there. But let's go down to the bottom of the page to Tractate Arichin in the Mishnah. And this is a difficult one that I'm going to ask you to parse out. One may not turn a field into a yard, nor a yard into a field, nor a yard into a city, nor a city into a yard. So what is that? Take a look at it and see what that is about. Because it's a little different than you might think.
It is very thought-provoking because, as we know, a yard belongs to a house, and a house belongs to an individual, one person. It does not belong to... A house belongs to a yard, to the person who lives in it, several people. It does not belong to a city. And then it says, not a yard into a field, because once again, it still belongs to one person. A field can belong to anyone if it's out in the open, and not a city into a yard. So once again, it's very combative because it has so many meanings.
So just so that I need to clarify something, even though you're completely right that a yard is what we describe as our personal space, nowadays a yard was shared. So in ancient cultures, I think once I drew a picture of the courtyard of a house and the oven in the middle, and that is an example. People shared a yard, like people in an apartment building might share a yard. In addition to that, there are things, I live in Calabasas, and there's something called the Calabasas Commons, which is not anything like a real commons. A real commons, which is also migrash, is a communal area for grazing of animals or for things like that. But this is really important. This is a really important thing with respect to what we do in communities. And I think it's the only text I have really ever seen that does this. If you have a field, you can't build a shopping center or apartments or new homes or whatever on that. That's what Mishnah is saying. So clearly, if the field is there as a field, that is how it stays. And then you don't turn a yard into a field, is a very interesting commentary. It's basically a commentary that says human beings have a right to live too. In other words, if you have houses built in a community and there's a small area or an area of shared property amongst the people or individual, but mostly shared property in those days, you can't just take that away from people and change it. So this is a Mishnah creating a balance for the community. You need to take care of a field for so many different reasons, because it provides food for you. because it provides food for your animals, because it provides food when you leave the corners untouched for the poor. The field is crucial. However, it's also okay for people to have a place. And that shouldn't be just taken away without thought. So, nor a yard into a city. So in other words, if you want to, as LA used to do, like tell everybody that they need to leave where they're living, they'll pay them a certain amount of money because the freeway has to go in. Eminent domain, thank you. You can't, in this Mishnah, you can't do it. If it's some peoples are living there, you can't just decide you're going to turn it into something else. What? It's still done. And then, nor a city into a yard. If the city is where it is, then you cannot go and say, tear down the city, we need to build something else there. So it is an egalitarian Mishnah that we don't generally see.
You know, this seems totally impossible to me to try to follow that. And yet I read a book on the environment. It was fiction, but it was so interesting about what they did to really implement things so there was no global warming. And they had to lower the population. They had to put through routes so that animals could go wherever they want. And they had to do all these different things that, you know, I would think were impossible. So it was very interesting.
Well, one second, and then I'll get you, Lana. So it's very interesting that you say that, because we need to think, I'm telling you to take a look at Jewish texts and to try and think things through. Because do we want to be the people who weren't allowed to be born? I mean, we have to be real about it. We have to do absolutely everything we can to take responsibility for our environment. That's in every text we have here. However, this last one I put here because it's important too. People are living beings as well, and within reason, not like, you know, not deliberately destroying what you do, being more conscious. We have a right to be here too. At least that's what the Mishnah says. You don't have to agree with the Mishnah, though.
I remember as a child, we would take drives, and you get to Torrance or the Valley. I lived in the city, Fairfax area. Just go out to Torrance, and anywhere you drove, orange groves everywhere. And you know, there's a few a little bit of an orange grove at CSUN, and I found one on a back street one time, but you know, they're all gone.
When I was a little kid, my parents bought a new house in Walnut Creek, not here, in Northern California. But it was next to acres and acres and acres and acres of walnut trees. Yeah. Well, I was little, you know, it was a new house, but I gradually saw all the rest of those walnut orchards go away. So the Mishnah is really great this way because it's saying what Judaism says all the time. Life and the world in balance. You need to be aware of all sides to do the very best you can. So Abraham Joshua Heschel says,
I can't see.
oh.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
But I can't see it.
You want to say something? No.
We need to build more bridges so the animals.
Yeah, we do have that bridge that they're building across the freeway so that the animals can go from one area to another.
I passed it this morning because I went to physical therapy in Agoura Hills, and I saw them working on it. I have to say, living in Calabasas, when I heard about this, I went, uh-oh, because we already have mountain lions, coyotes, skunks, yeah, all of the, well, they weren't there before me. I just moved there 2 years ago. I had no idea that they were going to all be there. But so it is no fun when a coyote jumps over your fence and you've got your 2-year-old granddaughter standing there in the backyard, I have to say. So anyway, I saw that overpass. It's coming to be, and I realized that on the left side of it, it's completely empty land. On the right side of it, it's completely empty land. And so that crossover gives the animals the opportunity to go from one part of empty land to another. And I have a feeling that that's going to stay there. So I was more relieved because they weren't building this thing where you go over to the other side and there's houses, there's houses there. So, I mean, I'm a people carer too, like what can I say? But we should go on to the Abraham Joshua Heschel. I'll read it. There are 3 ways in which we may relate ourselves to the world. You know who Abraham Joshua Heschel is. He's a modern world. He was. We may exploit it. We may enjoy it. We may accept it in awe. So, what do you think about these 3 possibilities? Okay. So your thing would be, we exploit it. Does anybody have
I think we do it all.
You think we do all 3? Okay. About a balance.
I think that some people did wonderful things with for other people to enjoy it, like buying all the land in Santa Monica Mountains, where there is no building and everybody can go there and enjoy it. And it's I really am happy that somebody was doing it. Some people.
Okay. Let's hope this gets to you, Janice.
I can stand it really. Okay.
Move a little bit closer.
A little bit closer, yes. No, I think we're okay, sort of. Okay. We can enjoy it, but we have to work at enjoying it, and by doing the things we're doing, like building bridges for animals and seeing to it that the world doesn't get destroyed, and accept it in awe, because that's what we're doing. We're making it for us, but we're making it for the animals and the plants also, so that we can enjoy them and they can do what they need to do.
I'm going to go on. You haven't. Right, we can't ignore it. So basically, what Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel was saying is, wrap your head around all of these things. All of these things that we do this, we exploit it. We also live, God willing, and enjoy experiences in our life. And you're right, you can enjoy the development of things that really help to protect our world. But he's also saying we need to stand in awe of God's creation. Because if we stand in awe of God's creation and we internalize that the same way that it happened in the book of Genesis, we will deal with God's creation differently than maybe we would if we just took everything for granted. So let's move on. Do we have any time left?
Okay. Sure.
This deals with other people because what, as the Jewish people, we have all these wonderful, readings from the Torah and the Mishnah and, the Talmud. But how about other people, Christians or Muslims, what, do they have any texts that are similar to this? Because we can't be alone.
Christians have this Bible.
But do they follow it?
They don't have the Mishnah. But we also have Jews who are unaware of our own text. So that's kind of why I brought it to you today. Because if you decide to take this with you and you're talking to somebody else, you can pull it out and say, look at how many thousands of years we have been saying these kinds of things. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to share. So now we're going to go into something that still exists in Jewish life from the time of the Torah till now in Israel. And that is the Jubilee year. So it is here. Who would like to read that? I'm here. If you're in the back and you want to read,
Just yet.
closer and I will.
All right. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow, neither shall you reap the aftergrowth or harvest the untrimmed vines, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You may only eat the growth direct from the field. In this year of jubilee, each of you shall return to his holding. When you sell property to your neighbor or buy any from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. In buying from your neighbor, you shall deduct only for the number of years since the Jubilee, and in selling to you, he shall charge you only for the remaining crop years. The more such years, the higher the price you pay. The fewer such years, the lower the price. For what he is selling you is a number of harvests. Do not wrong one another, but fear your God, for I, the Lord, am your God.
So the Jubilee year happens every 50 years. But every 7 years, we also have a cessation of planting in Israel. So I'm sure that some of you know about this. Every 50 years is a reversion. So in other words, if you have purchased land from somebody else and you buy it at the end of the Jubilee year, your family can use that land for 50 years. And then it stops because you have to let the land rest. It also reverts to the person who owned it. So in other words, they had to change that part of it because in the time of the Talmud, they changed that part of it, the part where you have to return things to original owners because it was untenable in a changing society. But with regard to the growing of the crops, it continues to be something that is done. In other words, you can, in the 50th year, you take a long rest from planting those crops. You cannot use them at all. You have to just let them grow what they grow, and you cannot plant, you cannot reap, you cannot do anything. Why? Also in the 7th year, they still do this in Israel. They just got done with one of these years. So why do they do that? Right.
It's just the same as we do here in the United States. You leave a land fallow or a field fallow so that it can restore itself.
That's true. We do that here, but we don't do it because God told us to. Right? So in this particular case, they in Israel, during the year that everything lies fallow, then you have to get your produce from somewhere else. So they ship it in from Europe or someplace else that isn't in isn't in that year. But what they have done is they have made it possible for themselves to farm the same land over, think about it, over thousands of years. And that land has still been usable because they were environmentally sensitive enough to know that causing inconvenience for people for a year makes the whole community be able to continue to grow crops for a long time to come. So here's the next one. When you enter the land and plant any tree for food, you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden to you, not to be eaten. In the 4th year, all of its fruit shall be set aside for jubilation, meaning you give it to God. And only in the 5th year may you use its fruit. That is, yield to you may be increased. I, the Lord, am your God. The fruit doesn't just lay there. It was okay to give the fruit to the poor. It was okay to feed the fruit to the animals. What you could not do is use it for yourself, because you had to start to look at your trees as something that doesn't just belong to you to provide you things as often as you want. That there's a deeper meaning for the growth of those things than that. So you have to set it in the soil. You have to let it develop in the soil. I know that there's some rules with regard to how much of it you can pick like that, but because you need to allow the fruit tree to establish itself. But it's beautiful. Susie, thank you for coming up front.
I have a question. If you are not allowed to plant every 7 years, that means 7, 14, 21, 49. Then the 50th year is the Jubilee year. That puts 2 years in a row that you wouldn't be able to plant.
That's interesting. Her math is way better than mine. I'm not sure how, do you know how that works, Zisel?
I'm sorry, I was closer to something else.
Oh, okay. No, that's, I don't know whether they make you do it 2 years in a row. I think they don't, but I don't know for sure. Anybody wants to do research? I guess I have to. Yeah, you guess you have to. So, Zisel, 1 minute, please. Sure. We'll just do the last text together. So I hope you have this idea of how important it is in Jewish law and Jewish life ever since our inception to be aware of our world, aware of our crops, aware of what we own, aware of what we share, aware of all of these different kinds of things. I think it's absolutely beautiful, but I guess that's why I'm a rabbi now. So let's do the last one. Did somebody want to read Sefer HaChinuch? That's a later text. Anybody?
Righteous people will not destroy even a mustard seed in the world, and they are distressed at every ruination and spoilage they see. And if they are able to do any rescuing, they will save anything from destruction with all their power.
And that concludes our discussion for today. Zisel, you wanted to say something. You get the last word unless somebody else also wants to.
Just wanted to point out,
Talk to them and talk loudly.
yes, not at the very last, but the side before that, number 16. It talks about the 50th years, blah, blah, blah. But I'm coming down to one little sentence here in which it is established by what we read here that the land is not sold. What he's selling you is the number of harvest. The land belongs to God. The harvest then is what belongs to you.
Thank you. That is a good addition. By doing this, it makes it clear that we are, with the assistance of God and one another, because there are many Mishnayot, by the way, about the fact that it has to be God and human beings together. So in other words, God makes it possible for us to grow grain. To grow grain. Grain. To grow grain. God makes it possible for us to grow grain. But human beings are the ones who have to harvest it, add to it, and turn it into bread. So everything we do in Judaism is a cooperation between us and God. And these texts, too, are a reflection of that. So thanks for having me here today, and I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week and a great afternoon. How was what? I'll take to the branches.
Was beautiful. Thank you. Such a pleasure.
What's up, Warren? I don't know this. You're going to have this in a book.
I have a magazine of it. It's in a magazine.
Yeah, it's happened before, but I don't know.
Crochet World?
I don't know. That's
I could do a pattern of it. Would you? Okay. I'll make a bunch of copies of it. Everybody wants it. Yeah, he made it.
I know he wore
I have a question. I was going to ask you before. On the 6th patio, did they plant more
for this, and there were other
separate copies? Did they?
But I
When you go to Israel, I'll find out.
I like that one and the one
No,
here.
seriously, because you think they plant extra stuff that they don't, especially in 48.
Hello, hello. For those of you that are remaining, there's tomato soup in the cafe.
That was a different sweater. That was. It's pretty quick. Once you learn how to do a post crochet, it's fast. Because that's a post.
He was away in the service. You just do it in a row.
It goes fast.
Through military service. My dad came back from the service. He said, no, he doesn't use the
You go around, what you're doing, you got your, you double, and you want to go around it. So this is going this way. So you've got your shell and your post and the shell and the post.
Yes.
It's not this way. It's this way. But
this still goes fast. That's what I'm saying, this is post crochet.
I don't know what post
It goes around the stitch as opposed to going on top of your stitch. It gives you the instructions.
Thank you.
I'll bring the magazine back. Helen already has the pattern.
Managed to do workaround with that.
Yeah, oh yeah, he was an electrical engineer for 800 LA Unified School with that eye. And if something's burning up, call him.
I know, he knows a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he does everything.
Great. That is like the perfect husband. My husband was
There,
like
but
that.
it takes me a while.
He was a
Understand
language.
language here.
Oh, you know what, this needs to be changed before.
No, no. And I know nothing. I'm like, my idea was.
Okay, so where are we going? We're going to your car?